cloud in general, but our motto is going beyond paperless to go serverless. So some things that you may or may not have seen of late I want to show briefly. So it does matter where you create your servers as a when you're creating them as a cloud-based provider. So I'll give you an example of creating a server. So everybody knows what a server looks like. It's one of those machines over there. Everybody's probably familiar with Amazon. Where are you running your data center? Is it cloud? Is it?
Yeah, the end result goes through Limelight Networks.
Okay. Okay, so it ends up on Amazon, right? So Amazon, and not to get too technical for anybody else in the room, stop me if I am, but Amazon offers a variety of different instances and different servers, but everybody knows that June 14th of last year was Flag Day, and there was a major outage, and all of Amazon US East went down, okay, for example. So it's important, and then at the same time, if you have a burst, and you have a situation where all of a sudden all the publishers hit the same deadline at the same time and they need to burst out, create a bunch of new worker instances and then shrink that back down. That's sort of where we come in a little bit more in trying to help find the right fit, the right tools, the right tech that helps make that more of a manageable process. On the small end, if you talk about replacing for an individual law firm, an individual server, we can come and do that pretty inexpensively too, including taking some legacy apps that exist. Like in the law firm I worked in for 5 years, we had this big 6U server that we couldn't get rid of because it was the fax machine, effectively. And everything else got moved off that server, but it's taking up half a rack or 3/4 of a rack because there's nothing that you can do to move the server, to move the app, because it was old and nobody wanted to support it. So we can actually create virtual appliances that wrap the app, move it. Even if you throw away the installation media, that would be all gone. I'm going to show you an example here of a couple of different little cloud tools that we do use and make use of. First one is going to be DigitalOcean. I like DigitalOcean because it is, bar none, the fastest at creating servers. Bar none, okay? Because it's running all on SSD drives. So let's create a server, demo, rest. Sorry. Bless you. I have a few choices. I'm going to create mine in New York. I'm going to have it run Ubuntu. Let's have the most recent distribution and have a 64-bit server instead of a 32-bit. I'm not going to bother with the SSH, but let's create the server. Okay. So in under 1 minute, you have to think about how fast that is, right? Because it's taking an entire image and is re-imaging. It's copying it and making an entire server, operating system and all, in under 1 minute. About 23 seconds remaining. That is faster than I can install Microsoft Word, faster than I could pretty much install most products and most programs. And I can have an entire server on. Where that comes into scale is, let's say you need a burstable scenario where you need to be able to create servers on demand. Well, if you could create one in under a minute, then you could create 20 actually and scale that out in under a minute. So it can be a really great tool if you're going to worry about scaling and scaling up and scaling down and having this elasticity. So this is actually a server. It's created. Go to the console there. You can see it has a public IP address. There's the gateway. It's a real server. Let's see this pop open in a second. So there's my server. What's neat about this one is I can actually resize the server on the fly without powering it off. So I can make it bigger if it runs out of space without having to power cycle it. And then also here, I could even switch operating systems without having to destroy my server. So those are two things that are pretty neat. We're at Microsoft, so I wanted to show you Microsoft Azure. You haven't seen it because you said Amazon, that you've been part of. Well, what's very neat about what's now happening with Windows Azure is you no longer really need servers anymore. You can now create services. So if you needed a database, like a SQL database over here, let's create a new SQL database. So you can do a quick create the database. And I'm just going to call it Brisk. And I don't want the location. I'll even do a new server. So. And this is very useful for, let's say, a small organization, certainly a law firm that doesn't have SQL 2012. Doesn't want to buy the license for SQL 2012, but needs to have it for a short amount of time. So let's create the database. You can see it's creating the server right here.
How are you paying for this? Is this like a subscription basis?
Yeah, basically subscription. So over here you can see I just created it created the server, it created everything else. Here's my database. Okay, I'm going to set up my firewall rules to allow it to reach for my IP address. So it can be secure for litigation purposes. This is secure now. If I need a common e-discovery. And then here's my connection string. Okay. So here's a little flavor of that. Here's SQL. Let's connect to it. So I had a lawyer the other day ask me, he said, well, I need the database, but I need a server for this, and I have to set up my server, and I have to install SQL and do all of that. You don't really need to do that anymore. And here you can see, here's my database Brisk. SQL 2012, fully operational, fully ready. What we also do, what's equally interesting is now that you don't just have SQL, but you also have the NoSQL. So how many of you guys have worked with NoSQL before? At all? Okay. So this is MongoHQ. Mongo is a member of Brisk, 10 Gen, that makes Mongo. Mongo is probably the leader in NoSQL databases, and they basically create what's known as a document database. You don't store tables, but you store these collections of objects. So very, very easy. This MongoHQ allows you to create a database, again, just like DigitalOcean did. I'm going to put this in Amazon. I'll put it on Sandbox. This is just a small database here. It's called Brisk. Okay, let's create the database. I must have clicked something. I clicked off. Try that
You
again.
broke it.
What? Keep clicking something. There we go. Because I don't have the credit card on this one. That's why it failed before. Because I was telling you it was going to be something that we're putting up. So this is a NoSQL database. If you haven't seen it, it stores very differently. So here's what we call collections in NoSQL. You could think of as tables, in essence. So let's add a new collection. And so the collection that I'm going to create is going to be called, let's do attendees. I hope I spelled that right. Okay, so here's my collection of attendees, and then we add what are known as documents. So documents are just simply what we call JSON here. So let's do first name, Bob, last name, Smith, and then, address, Now, what's nice about these NoSQL databases is they're very, very, very flexible for storing information. So this is one document that's in here. I can then create other documents that have very flexible pieces. So some people might have a city and state. Some people might have a province. So I can actually radically change my data that's being stored per type. And I can query it just like any database. And this falls under the category of big data. So if I want to store logs, I want to store things that get really, really big, really fast, I can do that. So what does It's Your Internet do, and what are we trying to do? What we're trying to say is that you don't really need anything anymore but the computer connected to the internet. And this becomes a commodity piece that I can throw in at any point, I can plug in, and we can take this a lot further to the point that we are actually developing whole-scale applications right on the cloud. So this application here that I'm going to give you a little bit of a peek of, what this is actually doing is giving a cloud-based development where I can have collaborative development. Everything that you're seeing here is just happening on the internet. Nothing is happening on this computer. And all of these computers are virtual machines that are created and destroyed as necessary. And all of this code that's being shared halfway across the world, this team happens to be all in Nigeria working on this application. They're able to access all of the same things and without investment in server, hardware, or software. It's all automated. That's what we're trying to bring the glue to everything. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan.
No, you're not.
No? Not ready yet?
The last person who took this out changed all the network settings.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. We
But Jonathan, I
we're gonna have a.
I have a question for
You
you.
should be using the virtual.
Yes.
I have a question for you. That's really cool, all the stuff you can do. Why would I want to do that? I just spent $2,000, or I have $2,000 worth of servers there, and isn't this going to cost me a lot more money to do all this?
All right, so the economics are really good. So for example, on DigitalOcean, it's $5 per month for a server that normally would probably cost you $2,000.